Good evening. We'll take roll call.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Mrs. Palomo,
Here.
Mrs. Gandhi,
Here.
Mr. Hyatt,
Here.
Mr. Lansky,
Here.
Mrs. McCormack,
Here.
Dr. Miskowitz,
Here.
Mr. Petruno,
Here.
Mrs. Seward,
Here.
and Mrs. Mendez.
Here. I'll draw your attention to Sunshine Law, Statement of Videotaping of Public Portion of Board of Education Meetings, the Public Comment Statement, and no smoking or vaping on school grounds. Can you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Announcements?
The Marlboro Middle School Chorale, Wind Ensemble, and Jazz Band traveled to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from April 19th through April 20th to compete in the World Strides Heritage Music Festival and visit some of the local attractions. We congratulate our teachers and musicians who represented Marlboro well with their talent and musicianship. The MMS Wind Ensemble and Jazz Band earned silver awards for their performances. The MMS Chorale earned a gold award and was awarded the Outstanding Chorale Ensemble Award for being the highest scoring vocal ensemble to compete. Congratulations to all.
We're just going a little out of order. We are going to go into executive for a couple of minutes, so I am just going to review the executive session resolution. Be it resolved that in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, the Marlboro Township Board of Education shall conduct a closed executive session pursuant to the personnel and legal exceptions prescribed by NJSA 10-4-12 for the purpose of discussing matters of attorney-client privilege. It is anticipated that the length of time of this executive session will be approximately 30 minutes, and that action may be taken in public after the executive session. Be it further resolved that the minutes of the executive session will be released when the need for confidentiality in accordance with NJSA 10-4-12 no longer applies. Can I have a second? Ashley? Any discussion? Okay. Any opposed? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for waiting. We just had to discuss a couple of things that had come up that we had to review. So thank you. Roll call?
Mrs. Bellomo,
Here.
Mrs. Gandhi,
Here.
Mr. Hyatt,
Here.
Mr. Lansky,
Here.
Mrs. McCormack,
Here.
Dr. Miskowitz,
Here.
Mr. Petruno,
Here.
Mrs. Seward,
Here.
and Mrs. Mendez.
Here. Okay, we now have the public hearing on the 2024-2025 school year budget.
All right, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the 24-25 public hearing for the Marlboro Township School District budget. So just from where we left off in March, we did submit the tentative budget to the county. It was approved with no changes. So what is being presented to you tonight is the same budget that was voted on the tentative budget back in March. So there were no fiscal changes, program changes, nothing to mention in the public hearing that would warrant to bring to your attention. So it was the same exact thing. But just to go over some of the key highlights, and we'll go over the revenues, the expenditures, and exactly what's detailing inside the budget, as well as the tax impact at the end. So during the budget, we faced some challenges. Some of the challenges were we saw a lot of increased costs for the maintenance of the school facilities, some things that we just can't live without, we have to continue. We saw increased costs for transportation services as well as special ed services and added district tuition. Again, these are some things that are costs that cannot be cut out, and these are things that we need to continue to budget for. One of the big ones was the increase for the health benefit costs. As you can see, we budgeted for a total of $15,857,000 for health benefits for the 24-25 school year, which I believe is about a 10% increase from 12, but the year prior was 15, so it's collectively a 27% increase over 2 years. Salaries, again, collective bargaining unit salaries, when we settle, we have to budget for those increases. So those are built into the budget as well. And then also our annual PERS pension and DCRP mandatory contributions we have to make on behalf of the state totaled about $1.6 million, which I believe was another 40% increase. So you'll see a lot of increases go over what we're allotted, which is the 2%. And mind you, the CPI was also 5.86% for transportation, so they were able to go up that amount as well. This is just, again, an overview of where we started with the S2 cuts to where we are now. So in June 2018, of course, the state passed the S2 bill, which modified the school funding formula. As you know, Marlboro was considered overfunded. And because of that, state aid was held flat for many years with declining enrollment, and then they decided to start chipping away at some of our funding. And then on top of that, in July of 2020, right after COVID, the state passed the Chapter 44 bill, which basically promoted new health plans into the school employee health benefits program, and in result of doing so, they believed that it was going to pass off savings to the taxpayer by really lowering your tax base of how much you can go up to. So you can see before 2018, in 18-19, before S2, our total state aid funding was about 11.1 million. And then here we are today. As you can see, 23-24, before I get to today, 23-24 showed you about at 7.4 million. So over the collective course of about 6 school years, you lost a little under $4 million when it came to state aid, so state funding from the state. On top of the Chapter 44 decrease you saw as well for the 22-23 and 23-24 school years. So 23-24 was kind of a rough year for us, but 24-25, our enrollment started to steadily increase. S2 was phasing out. We actually saw an increase of state aid for the first time in a while of $558,000. We also showed no savings under the Chapter 44 bill, so we also did not have a tax levy offset with that as well, so that was zero. So there was no effect to that as well, too. So every year we meet with administration, we meet with the departments, we meet with everyone just to develop strategies to reduce the taxpayer's impact. And by reducing the taxpayer's impact, you really need to look at everything. Some of the ways we really just dive into this budget is we request the departments to build basically go about zero-based budgeting and really start from scratch and only budget what you need. Sometimes we do position reductions, whether it's through resignations or retirements. Sometimes they just go away through attrition, where we're able to just absorb the job or consolidate the duties just to really not have to essentially ruin lives and have to fire anybody or terminate anybody. So we try to do it through that way, get creative. We reduce the school budget allocations by 10%. This is a contingency. We have them built in the event that we need it. We make sure it doesn't affect instruction or direct impact of kids. But at the same time, we allow the principals the autonomy to reduce their budgets to 10%. We don't do it for them. So we give them that flexibility because they know their buildings better than us. We analyze the utility trends accurately with the BPU. We actually check the website routinely just to make sure that we're budgeting correctly and spot on for utilities. The two things that we do utilize are our reserves. We have a maintenance reserve and a capital reserve. You can see in the maintenance reserve, we're taking out 1.5 million, and in the capital reserve, we're taking out 1.1 million for a total of 2.6. Now, the 1.1 is for the HVAC project at Marl, and then the 1.5 is a various amount of projects that we'll get into on another slide. Excuse me. And then every year we have surplus. We try to utilize the surplus just to offset all the increases we're seeing, so we really do not have to make too many reductions or too many I would call them slashes or anything to the budget that would really directly impact our district. Lastly, this year, due to the exorbitant amount of costs we were seeing, we are utilizing $1 million from bank capped from the health benefit waiver. So due to the health benefit waiver increase, we were able to obtain a waiver in the amount of $205,526. Also, on top of that, we took about, I think it was $794,000 to equate to the million that was coming straight out of bank cap. Now, for people who are not familiar with bank capped, so every year you're allowed to go up to 2% per your tax levy from the previous year. If you have any sort of bank caps left over, or if you have any sort of accruing bank caps from previous tax years, you're able to tap into that and to utilize that and put that on top of the 2%. So it is taxpayer money. It is something that we're utilizing to go above the 2% cap, so we do not have to make grave reductions when it came to over $1 million, because unfortunately when you have to start making reductions of $1 million or more, it's not just programs or vehicles or putting off projects, it's tied to salaries and benefits. Some of the district-wide budget highlights, again, I work with Mr. Balone very closely when we build this and all the departments. We want to maintain all the instructional programs and services, and that would be core subjects, special education, related arts, and we also want to maintain the current classroom sizes. We do not want them to increase. And so we care very deeply about that when it comes to increased class sizes, and we meet with the principals regarding enrollment projections and enrollment meetings just to forecast class sizes and forecast the enrollment of what they're thinking for grade level, just so we don't get in that bind or get in that habit of just getting into that trouble. We continue to focus on the student achievement, and you'll see through some of the curriculum updates as well. Technology hardware is a big one. We try to keep up on our technology infrastructure and our hardware and software. We're continuing to budget for the Chromebook replacement cycle that we do every year. We're also budgeting for staff Chromebooks. With the additional state aid we received, I believe we were able to put it in the budget where they're at their end of their useful life, where it's about 4 years old and we need to start replacing them. We continue the presence of the Class 3 officers with the partnership with the township. That's a shared service that you'll see on another slide. This is definitely a great partnership with us, and it's only grown even more. So we want to just continue that. These are some department highlights. So special services. So we're working on, we budgeted to implement a ERI program, so an emotionally regulated impairment program, with the hopes of actually bringing students back into district and not having to pay such high costs for out of district, and it's also tied with transportation. So Special Services is putting together that program. This will be the first time in Marlboro that we have something like that, where we would able to possibly put kids back in, bring kids back into district. We still had to budget for the out-of-district tuition and the transportation services associated with all those students that go out, even the ones that we anticipate bringing back, just in the event that, you know, they need to stay out or something happens where we make sure we budget for it. And you never know. We have an unanticipated budget as well, where you may have a student that comes in November, March, that may have an out-of-district placement, but we have it budgeted, so we don't need to rob Peter to pay Paul, essentially. There are no reductions for services for special education students in this budget. If anything, it has slightly increased just due to the cost of those services. So we budgeted for the increases, but we did not reduce any of the services in the budget. Curriculum includes the replacement for textbooks and supplementals for math grade 1 through 4 and science grades 6 through 8. So that was a big purchase for us. We usually do those on 3-year program cycles where we work with the vendor and we just budget for the year 1 and then we finish paying it by the 3rd year, because if we had to budget for that up front, we would have had to make some cuts. So we got creative with making sure we got the updated materials but not sacrificing the budget. Security and technology. So we are budgeting to provide an additional security monitor that will basically serve as a floater district-wide. So we were having some, I mean, not issues, but just for substitute coverage, just always having somebody on hand and always having somebody available is really beneficial for us, so we're budgeting that extra position. We're also budgeting for a cyber reassessment and wiring upgrades, I believe, at one of the middle schools and an elementary school. The cyber reassessment is something that I believe we do cyclical every 2 or 3 years. And so what happens is we'll have a third-party vendor come out, basically assess our security, our firewalls, basically everything involved with cybersecurity, and then they'll report out to us to see if there's any fail-safes or any, you know, internal control weaknesses that we can improve on. Building and grounds, of course, the big one is the implementation project for the HVAC for Morel. That is partially funded through the ROD grant. The other portion is the 1.1 I talked about that we're funding through Capital Reserve. So this is just a list of the facility projects that are in the 1.5 million and the 1.1 million of the reserve. So the 1.1 is the top one, the Morel HVAC. Some of the other ones that are comprised of the maintenance reserve amount. So you have the asphalt and concrete repairs district-wide. That is something that we go out to bid. Replacement of the fire system sprinkler pipes at Abbott Early Learning Center. I believe we had an assessment done and they are due, they're at the end of their useful life, and we checked with insurance, we checked with a lot of areas to see if anything could possibly be covered or help with us, and they said really it's just time for replacement. So we would be planning on going out to bid for that. Exterior door project at Dugan, your replacement generator at Abbott that you saw at the previous meeting where we went out to bid for. Your courtyard hardscape project at Memorial, and that is the courtyard with the pavers that we were planning on doing. One of the floor remediations at middle school we're going to start. We're anticipating it to cost that much. It might be a little bit more, and that is due to the rubberized floor. We would get it abated and replaced because, believe it or not, there's mercury in those floors. I don't want anybody to get scared or worried about that, but it is monitored every single year. But it's just time to take a proactive approach and start getting ahead of it now before it ever did become an issue. But right now it's not. Your improvements at Asher and DeFino, that's really just flooring upgrades. The PA system is being budgeted for at Memorial. The drainage repair behind the baseball field at Middle, we're actually going to basically improve drainage similar how we did to Abbott and Middle School previously. Again, we always budget for painting and we always budget for brickwork around the district. Solely this one would be for middle school. And that's how you get your 2.6 million. So with our shared services, we really try to partnership just more for efficiency and just try to, for cost saving purposes. So these are highlighted of our shared services. Again, you already know the first two, the SRO and the Class 3s with the township. Frio Regional, they handle our non-public transportation, so all our aid and lieu payments. They are our service provider. We basically pay them to handle that service rather than going out with an outside agency. Ed data services we use for co-op for purchasing supplies or services or anything that's really on the ancillary bid list for us to utilize. MOESC and ESC&J we use for special education transportation mainly, but now they're starting to venture into different services as well, so that's very beneficial for us. One of them was one we approved last week, which was Arrow. Marlboro Township, again, we utilize them for the fuel, and we do a reverse energy auction for electricity services, which actually saves us a tremendous amount of money than directly going through it with ourselves. Workers' comp, we are basically in an insurance fund for workers' comp only, and then we provide the busing services for Marlboro Township Recreation in the summer. So again, this is just your total expenditures for the 24-25 school year. So you can see the total is 99 million, but 73.2% of that is made up of instruction, pupil support services, and your health benefits. And I believe just pupil support services is everything. Let's see. So include your social workers, your health, your speech, your guidance, media, and curriculum. So that is about 73% of this total budget. And of course, school-based budgeting, you have to balance. So revenue has to equal what the expenditures equal. And you can see 85% of the budget is your local tax levy, where state aid comes in at 8%. Your fund balance is what the surplus I was talking about is at your 2%. And then your reserves make up another 2.6%. Everything after that is something that we routinely budget for, whether it be extraordinary aid, tuition, which is your pre-K tuition, rentals, and your student activity fees. Again, it's a marginal amount compared to what actually is the driving force of the revenues. So just a quick tidbit, the state of New Jersey classifies with district factor groups for all of the districts. So it goes anywhere from A to J. J being the most affluent. We are actually labeled an I district. So that's just food for thought, where when they say that we're over adequacy, they really take a look at some of that stuff, and they basically deem it that when you are in a more affluent district, you should put more onus on your taxpayers and your local fair share rather than relying on the state for state aid funding. So this is just a historical trend of the budget information that we've seen starting from the 2021 school year. You can see the tax rate has gradually increased over time due to the budget increasing as well. And the enrollment has started to almost go back to levels of 2021 or pre-2021. So we're projecting 4,782 students. Mainly this is because of a lot of the housing developments that are starting to go up. We're getting ready to basically bring in some more students than anticipated. So that's why you see that enrollment projection the way it is. You can see the budget change is about 4.9% from the year prior. Now granted, that total number of the budget does include reserves, so some years may vary where. This year we're using 2.6 million in reserves. Other years we may have used lower, we may have used none, may have used higher, so that's where you get the variances almost. So this is just a breakdown to show you which school basically has the most enrollment out of the projected. So you can see middle school, both middle schools and Dugan are the three top highest enrolled schools in this district, with middle school actually being the most. Old Middle, sorry. So this is basically showing you the average property tax bills based off of other I districts, what I was telling you about with the district factor group. This is pulled from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs website. So it shows that even though our budget has gradually increased, we're still utilizing the full 2%. Amongst the other I districts in Monmouth County, we still are on the lower end of our annual property tax bills, and this is basically based on the average assessment of about a $500,000 house or property. So as you can see, we are trying to be mindful of that, but we're also trying to take into consideration that we are trying to do the very best we can when it comes to the tax impact. And you can see from other different areas that are also I districts. And then there's other comparable I districts on the right as well, where the only one really outbeating us is East Brunswick, which also has a higher enrollment. So here's the analysis of the tax impact. So your total tax impact is about 3.1% for this year's budget. You can see the 5-year average all the way to the right in yellow, based off of since 2021 until now. You do have your tax rate increasing from 1.12 to 1.15, and then it shows your property tax increase per your average assessed valuation. Now, mind you, it shows you a decrease in 2021. That decrease was mainly due to, that was the first year after we paid off our referendum from 2001 for Memorial and Abbott. So that was the last time this district has had a referendum, and that was 2001. So that's why it showed a decrease for that year. Yeah, 2021. Okay, and that is the public hearing. Does anybody have any questions regarding the budget? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Any questions from anybody? I know people spoke with Vinny one-on-one or had meetings with him and so forth, so. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we're now going to open it to public comments. I'll give you a second to gather. Is there anybody on the list? Oh, nobody on the list. Does anybody want to speak? Mrs. Bono?
Hi, everyone. Good, am I on? Usually you can hear me without it. Good evening, Farah Bono, 26 Nashua Drive. Good evening, President Mendez, Mr. Ballone, members of the board, my fellow community members. I'm actually here to inquire about the motion number 14 that you are going to be voting on tonight. As much as I am all for the motion, I just want to know if we can add in, if there would be a cap in the cost to the external experts in educational governance and legal compliance, considering the budget and all the cuts that the district has made in the past. We had to reallocate funds last year, and our math and literacy coaches at the middle school level, those positions were retitled based on funding. And we have to remember that we are here to serve the students of Marlboro Township. So I would like to see as much funds going towards the students. So I was just wondering if there could be a cap to the external expert component. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bono. Any other comments? Okay, motion to close public comments. Do I have a second? Ashley, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, public comments are closed. Communications.
I don't have any communications.
Thank you. HIB?
HIB report from the period April 26th, 2024 through May 2nd, 2024. There were 2 incidents reported.
Thank you. Upcoming meeting dates, Tuesday, May 21st is a regular meeting. Okay. Organization matters. Annette.
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolutions for approval. 1, board secretary. 2, insurance consultant. 3, school physician. 4, board designee. 5, public agency compliance officer. 6, district section 504 coordinator. 7, section 504 coordinator for program accessibility. 8, approval of qualified purchasing agent for bidding, purchasing, and sale of property. 9, procurement of goods and services through state agency for the 24-25 school year. 10, purchase professional services. 11, Open Public Records Act. 12, designation of legal newspapers. 13, tax sheltered annuity companies. 14, motion for review of MTPS district and Marlboro Board of Education actions in the handling of the incidents leading up to and following the April 16th, 2024 board meeting. I so move.
14 is going to be amended.
So 14 is going to be amended.
If it's going to be moved and seconded, then we should. Why don't we just move 1 through 13 at this point?
Okay,
Just move 1 through 13 first.
okay, so numbers 1 through 13, I so move.
Do I have a second? Dr. Miskowitz? Any discussion? Roll call on 1 through 13.
Mr. Petruno,
Yes.
Mrs. Palomo,
Yes.
Mrs. Gandhi,
Yes.
Mr. Hyatt,
Yes.
Mr. Alonsky,
Yes.
Mrs. McCormack,
Yes.
Dr. Miskowitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Seward,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mendez.
Yes. Okay, we now have the amendment to the motion for the review. For number 14. So I'll read it. It's long, but I think that you have most of it. There's a couple of revisions in it. I just want to highlight where it came from. So in the last meeting, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Gandhi had discussed it, and because it was a special meeting that we had, it was placed here for this meeting here. So it's here now. So I'll read through it, and then we'll move forward. Motion for review of the MTPS District and Marlboro Board of Education actions in the handling of the incidents leading up and following the April 16th, 2024 board meeting. Considering the recent events that occurred over allegations surrounding a student and teacher in the Marlboro Public School System, which revealed gaps and challenges within the Marlboro Board of Education regarding knowledge, communication, oversight, and response around this event, and having an impact on community trust and faith in the board, and recognizing the need to bolster our board processes and governance structures to ensure all board members receive timely and comprehensive information to carry out our responsibilities as elected officials, and acknowledging the opportunity to learn and improve from this experience, with an emphasis on the necessity for more robust crisis management mechanisms and community support, and highlighting the importance of establishing preventive practices and empowering the board to act effectively in the community's best interests under all circumstances. Therefore, it is resolved that the Marlboro Board of Education commits to a comprehensive review of district actions. The board will authorize the commencement of a comprehensive independent review of the district's actions and decisions concerning the incident and subsequent management to identify procedural weaknesses and identify areas for improvement. The independent committee selected by the board will include internal and external experts in educational governance and legal compliance. The committee will conduct a timely and comprehensive review of the district's and its member actions and decisions related to the incident and issue a report with findings and recommendations for improvement and action. Establishes an independent review of board and board member actions. The board will commence an independent review of actions of the board and its board members. The independent committee, as selected by the president, will include internal and external experts in educational governance and legal compliance. The committee will conduct a timely and comprehensive review of the board's and its members' actions and decisions related to the incident and issue a report with findings and recommendations for improvement and action. Develop enhanced communication protocols. The board is instructing the superintendent with developing communication protocols to ensure timely and thorough information sharing among all board members, especially regarding critical incidents impacting board decisions and public safety. Reaffirming commitment to ethical standards. The board reiterates its commitment to upholding our oath of office, maintaining the highest ethical standards, transparency, and to ensuring equitable access to information devoid of personal agendas. Pledge to foster community engagement. The board commits to ongoing dialogue and transparency with our community stakeholders to rebuild trust in the board. This motion is presented for immediate consideration to promptly address the issues at hand and restore confidence in the Marlboro Board of Education's governance and commitment to its constituents. So,
Motion.
what do we say?
Need a motion.
So I need a motion, the first motion, right? So, Ms. Gandhi, that's you. So, Ms. Gandhi, can you just you can say it on the microphone.
I so move.
Okay. And a second? Dr. Miskowitz.
I second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have some concerns with this motion, and I know it's going to wind up on a Gossip Girl blog later tonight, but
Wait, can I
have
just
to
say one thing? I'm so
speak my
sorry.
mind. Yeah.
On this part. We just have to be mindful of the things we say at this point, right, with active litigation. I just have to put that out there.
Well, it kind of segues into my opinion on the motion is that we have attorneys in place. Now we have special attorneys in place for a lawsuit that we're facing. I think that we have outlined policies in our district to make sure that most of what is said in this motion already happens. I don't really feel comfortable with an outside audit, much to Ms. Bono's point, paying more for outside firms to come in and audit a situation. Will this be for this specific situation that we are looking into, or the hypothetical situations to come in the future? I support our administration, and I support my fellow board members, and I just don't feel that this is something that will necessarily be foolproof if we have, God forbid, a situation in the future. So as this is outlined now, I don't really feel comfortable moving forward with this. If we could just maybe discuss in further Mr. Lalanski's motion of putting a plan of action into place, I'd feel a little more comfortable with being proactive than reactive, because in my own personal opinion, the fallout of this specific case that we're talking about was removing our attorney. So I would much rather move forward in a more unified way than an actual physical motion. Just my thoughts. Just wanted to share those. If anyone else wants to add.
Thank you, Annette. Any other discussion? No? Okay, I had a couple of...
I would like to add.
Oh, go ahead.
The motion, the part of the motion that I am very supportive of is the need to optimize our policies and procedures. I think that will promote progress as a board. From a standpoint, what I cannot stand behind is kind of some of the verbiage in here. There's a lot in this motion, and to be able to agree to all of this motion is something at this point in time I wouldn't be comfortable with. I would love to be able to discuss further, looking at policy 0133. That is a policy in place that kind of already serves this purpose. It's an internal board policy and something that can definitely, I could suggest be moved to the forefront to review, as well as policy 0155, which is our committees. If this was going to be something that I could vote yes for, I would love to see a motion made to add a committee that would be long withstanding to our list of committees, and it would be fulfilled in the same way as our other committees, as we see fit as a board. Just kind of taking this one incident only addresses one incident. It doesn't promote forward thinking. And I think here what everybody wants to see is progress. So if we take a committee that would kind of respond to all of these types of issues, and allow us to be transparent with our community, that is our purpose, as outlined by NJSBA. We are here, as the voice of our community as it pertains to MTPS. I think that kind of committee would serve very well for our board and kind of optimizing our procedures. Things that kind of stand out to me is reaffirming, pledging, and for those two things, I believe that in the fall I took an oath in order to reaffirm something. It would have to be that I did not fulfill the oath, and now I'm taking a pledge, as it states, to kind of reaffirm that commitment, and I don't feel comfortable doing that, as I do not feel that my oath on this board needs to be reaffirmed. It's there, it was made in the fall, and I stand behind the oath that I took in the fall. But I would love to see this motion be turned into a committee for our internal board, where we can optimize our policies, notwithstanding, after I'm here, after everyone is here, just a committee in place when things like this arise. We can kind of reflect on how it was handled and make sure that our protocol moving forward promotes better understanding, communication, and engagement on issues.
Thank you, Danielle. Couple of thoughts I had too. So I was highlighting some things that I thought were important and interesting in here too. And that mattered to the community and to us as board members. There are some things that you called out that I was like, that's something that we should definitely consider. I had taken similar notes, I guess, to what you did, Danielle. So there is a crisis response policy. There's also actually like a legal counsel policy. I looked at the crisis response policy and it hadn't been updated, I think, since 2014, and council policy. And so to me, I want to add those to the list, right to the forefront of things, to your point that you called out here about how to handle crisis. That would be important to me to weave some of what you had said in here, right? The comprehensive review, taking a retrospective of events and what had happened and learning from them. And I think upon just my glance at the crisis response policy, I think there's definitely room for some of what you proposed in there. I'd like to start, for me, at that place first to see I guess to your point, what could be long withstanding when I'm no longer here in another year and we're all, or whoever's here, that it will be in place that people will have to adhere to that, and how the board interacts with council is important to me too, based on obviously the events that had called out. So to me, I put that. Another piece that I put in here too, though, that I thought we all agreed on, develop enhanced communication protocols. Michael, Lalonsky, you had put the piece out about communication and making sure we're all communicating properly. But I had put in here, because you had some board decisions in public safety, and so something I had written was safety and security and communications committee could take a look at policies as well, and where they can come into play in some of the things that you outlined here. And so I thought that it was a good review of what you had written. I think I'd like to look at those places first and see where we can build something that's long withstanding and future and forward thinking, so that hopefully we can all work together. So that was just my thoughts, but I appreciate all of the well-written pieces. It really got my mind thinking, so thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have some. So, first off, thank you for sending it over, Aditi. I did get a chance to go through it. The two issues, I know the one issue I brought up last week, was, and again, no offense, was, with the board president making the choices for, who would be on this committee. The other issue that I, saw when I was reading it was the use of these outside entities, to come in and do this investigation, or, to look into, exactly what transpired. That didn't really resonate with me, after reading it. When, it was over 2 years ago, but when I campaigned and, ran and got elected for this seat, it was primarily based on taking, like, government out of the school and out of, like, board involvement. And, that's something that I truly believe, like, that's not something that I would want to waver on. And, that's a commitment that I made to everybody that did vote for me, and I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to go back on my word like that. And I feel like doing something like this would be bringing in more, more government involvement, or, even if it is at the municipal level. The one idea I did have, and I'm kind of like writing as everyone's talking, so just, this is like very rough, but, I thought maybe you had mentioned a crisis response policy. So I'm thinking like, maybe to look, whether it's at this issue or, God forbid, there's, any others, hopefully not while I'm here, but maybe, maybe another committee chosen by the board as a whole could be like a crisis or a critical response committee whose purpose would be to internally, like among board members, review and analyze the response and role in a critical situation within the district, and highlight the things that went wrong, highlight the things that were done well, areas we can excel in, areas that we did well in, something like that. I feel like that would really leave the district it would leave the board and the district, I feel, in a better situation, because it would be something that we can grow on, where we can realize if mistakes were made. I mean, look, we're human. Mistakes happen. So if they do, then, I think that the most important part of making a mistake is realizing it and, realizing the part you played in it so that you can grow from it. And I would hope that, a committee of this sort would be able to do that. I know I threw a lot at everyone, but it's just an idea, something to think over. And again, thank you for bringing this forward, because I do think that this is definitely something worthy and, should be looked into.
I just want to mention one thing. You talked about the government being involved. I agree. Those were just ideas. And I think after you mentioned, and I think one or two other board members, I'm completely in agreement that we don't have to. And it wasn't, they're elected, right? I think the committee is either volunteers or they're elected, I'm not sure. But it was, again, just a recommendation. I even mentioned NJSBA. I mentioned, a retired superintendent potentially. So I'm not saying that the, forming a new committee or any of the suggestions that any of you made right now, I just don't think that one replaces the other. It can complement each other. I don't think one replaces the other, in my opinion. So, it's difficult to kind of look at our own actions and come up with like truly unbiased ways of like fixing it or, moving forward. So that's the only thing. And I'm not opposed to any of the other suggestions. I think that's great. We should definitely try to update some of the policies that haven't been since 2014. I think Danielle's suggestion is fine too, to, have like a different committee. And yes, I think those things should also be in place. But again, I don't think one replaces the other. I think one complements the other.
Yeah, just to that point, Aziti, I know I had sent you one of my recommendations for the motion was that the communication committee take on the delegated responsibility of making sure if something needs to be communicated within the board to eliminate that phone chain situation that maybe was not the best choice, but Michael and myself and Chad are on the communications committee, and if something like this should arise, well, we have to reiterate and make sure that communication is sent to each and every board member. Maybe that's something the communications committee can take on, or the safety and security committee, not in lieu of a different committee, but just to fill those holes and fill those gaps where, I'm proud of Coffee Chat, but it doesn't take up so much time on the communications committee where we could delegate different responsibility in the literal sense of communication. So I didn't mean it that a committee shouldn't be formed. It's just that we all give so much of ourselves already. There's so much that goes into being a board member and so many hours spent and so much brain power, and it's almost like a second full-time volunteer job for some of us. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't burning the candle from both ends with the committees.
Yeah, and one more thing, Aldo, I thought I had changed this, and apologies for that, but I did change it where it would be for both committees, that it shouldn't be the president, it should be the board. So that's something that we need to just update on the second portion. I don't know how that may have not gotten to you, Mr. Rose, but for both of them, it shouldn't, I think it's for the, sorry, give me one second.
It's,
Let me just
yeah, it
quickly
says
look.
it in there, under establishes an independent review. In the third sentence, it says the independent committee as selected by the president. You
Right.
want that to read the board, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, as selected by the board will include internal, external experts.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to address that concern of yours, Aldo. So that's something that was left on. It shouldn't have been. It should be the board, because I did change it on the first paragraph up above, so. Yes. Yes, we're in agreement that that's the amendment to the motion. That it's
Dr.
not gonna be
Moskowitz,
the
do you agree
president.
with that too?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And then to address the concerns about the cost, I get it. You know, I obviously, and Mrs. Bono, 100%, I don't think we need to take anything away from our kids, but sometimes you have to put a little bit of money behind something for the betterment of our kids. And also, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. You know, and again, I don't know, Mr. Gross, or when we do RFP or look into it, you know, we can get an attorney or an audit firm or whatever to kind of do it at a flat rate. There's lots of creative ways to go around it. But we can't forget that even though, you know, I know we're a school district, but we're still a business at the end of the day, right? Where we need to make sure if there's something that needs either to be fixed or that we assess it. There were things that we could have done differently, better, the same, I don't know. We won't know until we look into it, so, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add, I agree with what everyone said here, and certainly I don't think we want government involved. I think people who are experts on governance, that's one thing, but definitely I would look for an independent third party to do this. I look at this in two forms. One is we need to figure out what we did right, what we could have done better, and then implement things towards that, of which there are 3 suggestions in here which I think are good. I agree with taking out the timeline, so that gives me the ability to vote on this because I want to also make sure that we do this in a timely fashion, but we need to do this in a way that doesn't introduce us to additional liability because that's the last thing anyone on this board wants. And thank you, Mrs. Bono, I agree with you, I agree with the DD. I don't think this has to be expensive. There are firms that specialize in auditing and doing things like this. I think if, I'm gonna vote yes on this, and I think there's no timeline, but to me, what that does is it reaffirms our commitment to take some action here. And we need to discuss it as a board in much greater detail to figure out when is the right time to do that, given everything that's going on in the background. So that's sort of where I'm at, my thoughts. But this is a good discussion, and I agree that maybe a committee, maybe communications committee gets involved in some of this, but I also want to just understand, again, what we did good, because that'll help enhance those things and what we possibly could have done better. That's all. That's it. That's my comments.
Just one additional comment. The paragraph that includes develop enhanced communication protocols, it's calling for us to instruct the superintendent when incidences of the severity that we saw following April 16th occur. One of the problems, or one of the things that I see that I'm not comfortable with using terms like instructing, is I would rather collaborate with the superintendent to form communication protocols, because the safety, security, and quick action of our superintendent to address these issues is paramount. I wouldn't want to bound our superintendent or security administration with immediately saying I have to call the 9 of us before I take action when there is a security threat to a student, to the school, or to anything like that. So verbiage like instructing the superintendent, I'm not comfortable with voting yes to, because I would rather collaborate in a committee setting to form better protocols that include our superintendent, because we are not there on the day-to-day. We don't know what it feels like to be in a crisis situation. And what's paramount is that our students and staff are taken care of before a phone call to myself, who really can't take action in the moment. That's not my duty as a board member.
I just want to clarify on that. So I don't think it's when something happens. The whole point is that we develop this plan now so that when something comes about, action is taken. Not that when it's happening, they have to call the board to figure out what next steps are. So I just want to clear that up, yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. In a committee setting, we would be able, I know for our policy committee, and even with our curriculum, we sit with the assistant superintendent, but Mr. Ballone sits into our policy meetings, and we're able to collaborate on a communication, like on a policy protocol. So collaborating on a communication protocol in a committee setting would be something I would be comfortable with. And maybe it's just the verbiage. It just seems I don't want to instruct Mr. Ballone that you have to do this immediately while he's trying to do his day-to-day work. So a couple of things in here that I wouldn't be comfortable saying yes to maybe are just verbiage that, need to be changed, but, that's just one other thing that I could kind of.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of the policy number, but I know there's a policy that already is either in place or I'm pretty sure it is in place that says that there is a plan that the superintendent's supposed to pull together for something like this. I don't have the crisis management. I'm not sure.
There's crisis response that has who the superintendent will reach out to, and it has a list of staff. It's actually not us first, to your point, Danielle. It's at this point we have to update it, right? Because it has to include the threat assessment team and all of that. But yeah, so that is in place, who's out there. We just have to make some changes to it.
Yeah, so I think this really, all it's saying is that we acknowledge, and I think over the last few meetings, everybody was questioning what happened, who called who heard about it first, right? So this is simply just telling the superintendent right now that this happened. So let's take a look and put certain policies or certain protocols in place, right? This is not like something, again, we've faced numerous different things, unfortunately, over the last couple of months or weeks, and nobody expects Mr. Ballone to pick up the phone and call all of us. That is not how we can operate. That's not our role anyway. We can't do it that way. But this is really just telling the superintendent now that, hey, we faced something. We know there was a little bit of a breakdown in whatever transpired. Let's look at that and put some protocols in place so that if and when things do happen again, that we're not kind of going down the same path again. So that's really what it is. It's not about day to day.
And
yeah.
I love that idea.
Me too.
But when I read this, that's not how it's coming across to me. But what you just outlined there is phenomenal, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that piece too. And I just want to clarify. After reading all of that, right, it's a lot, and then if I just voted yes, it means I agree to almost every word in here. But I do want to stress this point, I think what you were saying too. All these notes I have here are in agreement with pieces that you have. So I think that the path forward, even taking a look back, right, as a board and seeing what we could do differently, which I think we've been trying to do, right, and we're going to look at our policies. I'm for pieces of this. Just voting yes to every word in here right now is, I think, the only part I'm struggling. It's not that I'm not on board with the plan, because I am on board with most of the things in here. I just want to pause, take pieces out from here, and use them as, I want to say, like my guiding post to the things that I want to see that we can all agree on or work towards for how we can work together in the future. And so just yes means I agree to every single line, and that's the struggle. But the pieces and the spirit of it, I'm there.
So can you, just so I understand, what are the pieces that you're struggling with that's on here?
I think for me right now, I need to know a little bit more about an external review. I'm not against it at this moment in time. I can't say yes till I know a little bit more about it. I'm not saying I understand cost. I know we're in business. I get it. I need to know more about that. Also, there's some other things I know that I've mentioned before with external review at this point in time that just lead me to a little bit of concern at this very moment today. But other than that, there's also just how we conduct, I guess, the review. I have some logistical questions. Other than I know this is not the logistics, this is just that it's going to happen. I'm okay with looking back. I have no problem with that as a board growing from it. I think I just want to talk through it a little bit more.
Can I ask Mr. Gross to expand a little bit on the board instructing the superintendent with developing communication protocols? Are we teetering on that fine line of board administration, day-to-day?
No, I mean, it's no different than putting a because it's already in the policy. There's a policy in place that actually states something very similar. I'm just saying, let's actually move forward and do it and have something in place. So it's no different than the policies that we write that the district follows. It's as simple as that.
Is that the case, Mr. Gross?
Sorry.
It's okay.
We'll get used to that. It depends on what you instruct him to do. So again, it's matters as to what the meat to the actual policy will be or the procedure will be, not necessarily just the words. So it matters as to what is in the content of the instruction.
A lot of what I'm hearing Val, from you as well is the logistical piece, and I think that's where everybody's getting stuck on. I mean, what I'm hearing, most of you agree that this is needed. You know, again, I'm not putting the 90-day that I was initially, right? So that gives us a little bit more freedom to really explore how to move forward with this. But I, again, strongly believe that this is something that we do need, and I also think that we should take up what Danielle and Aldo and them mentioned about doing a different committee. I think, again, like I said, it complements one another. I don't think it replaces. So.
Understood. Go ahead, Dr. Miskowitz.
How can we pull this together because everybody's in agreement, something can be done. But now, everybody has, yes, it is. I just have to speak louder. How can we get together and formulate a motion? It doesn't have to be right now, but moving, you think so?
Yeah. Because I don't think anything in this motion is really, I mean, even using an external, auditor, we don't have to go with someone really expensive. There are just so many ways around it. I just think that, we've pushed this, it's been, 3 weeks now? Right. So we've had 3 weeks to really think about it, and we won't know until we actually put out an RFP what the cost is. If it is excessive, of course, I'm not going to be like, no, we have to move forward. We could take a look at it again. We could, again, come up with creative ways. But these are all logistical issues that we can work through. What we need to come together as the board and again, not just for us, but for our community. I know that people want answers. It's not just us.
Even if the number, let's just give a hypothetical, even if the number to audit is $10,000, I promise you, I cannot count on both hands how many people in this district can find something to do with $10,000 that would benefit our students. Even if it's something, obviously we have an immense budget, so $10,000 to $99 million sounds like a drop in the bucket, but you have to consider how that would reflect on staff members and people applying for grants if needed, or any type of supplemental funding. It's not just, you have to spend money to make money kind of concept in a business. This looking at the big picture of an outside audit, it might not sound like a lot of money in the moment to correct any mistakes that may have happened. It's just more for the grand scheme of things. If positions are being cut and salaries are, being voted on, and then we just haphazardly approve a $10,000 external audit, it's going to give sour feelings to people, whether or not you agree with it or they agree with it. There are people that are going to think that money can be spent.
I agree. I'm sure there were a lot of people that were not happy with the litigation fees for fighting 5756, right? They're both sides. Same thing here. That's one. The other thing is, we're talking about grants. So I'm going to go back to the thing that, we were fighting just about a month ago about MEF, who gives grants, and we're still going back and forth on if we're going to accept that or not. So I feel that if we're going to turn away from that, or we're going to pay money to litigate a lot of other cases that, again, half of the committee agrees to, the other half doesn't, the 10,000 to me is, and again, it may not even be that much. It may be less. We don't know. We're speculating. We can't, but I can say with certainty that we've put a lot of money behind some other litigations, right? So,
I mean,
right.
it's just ironic that the litigation money that was spent on my own ethics charge was found to be, forgiven. So there are other things in the district that the litigation costs are being spent unnecessarily.
No, agreed, and that's what I mean. So
every single day I will spend litigation on 57, 56. It's not a point
Right.
that needs to be brought up right now. This is just more or less, I understand what can we do moving forward. Can we amend policies? Can we, we have policies in place that need to be paid attention to. So can this motion be implemented by amending policies? It's not that I'm not agreeing with something needs to be done, but if we update our policies and we amend policies that are already in place, then we need to respect the policies that, like 9191. If we're going to take 9191 so literally, then maybe 0133 and 0155 needs to be amended and taken just as seriously.
Well, so there was what was the policy that was renewed or updated in 2014? The one that says to have like this
Crisis response.
So that was updated in 2014. I don't think, and I don't know how much of that was actually followed in this whole process.
I don't know enough of it. I just read it.
Right, exactly. And so I feel like, yes, policies are there, but I don't know how much we're actually referencing it and how much we're actually actioning. From 2014 to now 2024, if there was supposed to be a protocol or something in place, a plan in place already to kind of circumvent a lot of what happened here or how to move forward with it, and it wasn't put in place, that tells me that we need to do more than just put a policy together.
Would you be, Mrs. Gandhi, would you be opposed to I think there's a lot of good content here and a lot of things I would 100% say yes to. A lot of things, but not everything. Would you be opposed to amending it to maybe one or even two motions, separating this after we discuss it a little bit more, maybe in executive, where we can kind of make it more overarching and less specific? Things like policy implementation, I think that's phenomenal. Accountability to uphold policies, excellent. All of that will promote growth. It will promote better functionability of this board. And I think that part of this motion is excellent. And I love it. And I would vote yes 100 times over. There are some things, like I've mentioned, that I'm really not so keen on. So if we can discuss that maybe in an executive session, break it out into an overarching motion or maybe two separate motions, I think that, at least speaking for myself, for what we've outlined and the things that are really great about this motion, I would vote yes 100%.
If you don't mind, since we're already discussing this, I think the one question that was concerning is about instructing the superintendent, but I feel like you understand a little bit after clarification, so that is not a concern so much anymore, correct?
I would not vote yes to it as it's written here.
Just because it says instructing, so you're talking about just changing the word?
I would love to see that in a policy or as a communication protocol instead of just telling Mr. Ballone, this is how you're going to communicate. I want to hear his feedback as to what would be productive for him. I don't expect him to make 9 phone calls. I respect chain of command, with our president. So because of that, instead of using the word instructing, I'd like to collaborate through a committee or maybe with one of the committees that we already had, like Mrs. Seward said, to really put a procedure in place. But something that you said that resonates with me is the accountability to our policies. And even if we have to have a policy about being accountable to our policies, which sounds redundant, but that is paramount.
Agreed.
We could have a million policies, but if no one is actually looking at, following, or reading them, then they're just words on paper. So I love what you had said about that and being accountable to the policies that exist. But I think that if we looked at some of the policies, and I just, a couple that were mentioned, Mrs. Mendez mentioned a couple others, I think that we can make this motion more overarching to include accountability to the policies that exist in addition to some of the other stuff that's in here that's really great. It's just, there's a lot of information in here, and voting yes, it's hard to get 9 people to all vote yes to every single one of these paragraphs, because it could be one that stands out that's like, I can't get on board with that. And unfortunately, you know, a motion is a formal procedure to take action, and I can't take action on all of this, but I could take action on a lot of it, so.
Same, and that's the point I was saying too, that to say yes to every line is hard for me, but to Danielle's point, first of all, there is a policy and bylaws policy, but it doesn't hold them accountable. We talked about that. We brought it up in one policy meeting, so revising that one, right? And what happens when people don't? And because you had mentioned that too. I think there's a lot of things here that I would pull out, and I like the idea of breaking it up into 2 things and kind of like weighing in on it and overarching. I think we could get behind it. I think, I say we, I mean myself, and I know you.
Yeah, I don't want to see it just be dismissed if it's no, or that. I think that it's really important that we do something with this. It's just the entirety of it is not, I don't feel comfortable with the entirety, but I don't want to say, okay, push it to the side. That is absolutely not. I would love to see this quickly be voted on in a way that everybody is comfortable with.
And so, with that being said, we can move to roll call, or are you comfortable with that still, or where do you stand?
So I heard everybody here, obviously, right? And there's a lot of support in whatever's in here. What I'd like to do, just because this has been sort of lingering for a couple of weeks, is we move forward and vote on it, and then we can go back and do what Danielle is recommending, that, you know, we could go ahead and see if we need to, again, depending on how this passes or if it doesn't pass. But I just want to clarify again, I know you thought that what I'm saying is that Mr. Ballone would have to call us during every incident. That's not what that is. Again, I know that's what you think, but the instruction piece is just that we're basically recommending him to put a protocol in place for things like this. That's it. And then once it's already in place, we review it, we make sure this makes sense, you know, we're all on board with it, again, collaborating, whatever it is, and then that stays, and that's what we're going to use for future incidents. So
yeah, and if and when it's written like that, 100%. That's a no-brainer for me.
Okay, good discussion. All right, we're going to move to roll call. Right, you wanted to vote, you said, correct? Okay.
Okay, roll call vote for organization matter number 14, as amended. Mr. Petruno?
No, as to the way it's written, but, you know, echoing the sentiments of everyone else, I'd love to see it revised to a way that we can pass it, but no for the current revision.
Mrs. Seward?
No.
Mrs. Palomo?
No.
Mr. Hyatt?
Yes.
Mr. Lalansky?
No.
Mrs. McCormack?
No.
Mrs. Gandhi?
yes.
And Dr. Miskowitz?
I'm voting yes, too.
Okay, and then last, Mrs. Mendez.
No, for the reasons I had mentioned.
Okay, so I have 6 noes to 3 yeses. Motion does not pass.
We can still move this forward. We can still move this forward, yeah. Yeah. 'Cause there's a lot of good.
Okay, financial and business operations matters. Danielle?
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolutions for approval. 1, final 2024-25 school year budget adoption. 2, adjustment for healthcare costs. 3, use of bank cap. 4, capital reserve withdrawal, other capital projects. 5, withdrawal from maintenance reserve. 6, travel and related expense reimbursement. 7, authorized signatures. 8, uniform minimum chart of accounts. 9, after-school sports enrichment programs. 10, renewal of contract, educational data services for purchasing procedures for the 25-26 school year. 11, harassment, intimidation, bullying, HIB report. 12, approval of agreement, E-rate counseling, Inc. 13, reaffirmation of team teaching, integrated preschool tuition. 14, approval of addendum to extend the professional service agreement between the MTBOE and ESS Northeast LLC. 15, transfers. 16, travel. I so move.
I have a second. Michael? Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. McCormack?
Yes.
Dr. Miskowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. Gandhi?
Yes.
Mr. Hyatt?
Yes.
Mr. Olansky?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Paloma?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mendez?
Yes. Curriculum matters, Dr. Miskowitz?
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolutions for approval. Curriculum guides, 1 curriculum guides. I so move.
I have a second. Aditi? Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hyatt?
Yes.
Mr. Olansky?
Yes.
Mrs. McCormack?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. Paloma?
Yes.
Mrs. Gandhi?
Yes.
Dr. Miskowitz?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mendez?
Yes. Personnel matters, Aditi?
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolution for approval. 1, retirement. 2, resignations. 3, full-time teaching staff. Oh my God. 4, school psychologist, 2024-2025 school year. Certificated administrators, 24-25 school year. Operational administrators, 6 operational administrators, 7 stipend supervisor and assistant supervisor of buildings and grounds, 24-25 school year. 8 non-aligned certificated administrators. 9 non-aligned non-certificated administrator. 10 non-aligned support staff, 24-25 school year. 11 secretarial personnel, 24-25 school year. 12 bookkeeper and clerk, 24-25 school year. 13 special education instructional assistant, 24-25 school year. 15 school monitors, 24-25 school year.
Just
Oh, sorry.
14.
14 kindergarten basic skills instructional assistants, 24-25 school year. 15 school monitors, 24-25 school year. 16 school aides, 24-25 school year. 17 buildings and ground staff, 24-25 school year. 18 stipends maintenance workers. 19 head custodians and night custodial supervisor, 24-25 school year. 20 stipend head custodians and night custodial supervisor, 24-25 school year. 21 courier, 24-25 school year. 22 bus drivers, hours and salaries, 24-25 school year. 23 bus attendants, hours and salaries, 24-25 school year. 24 computer technicians, 24-25 school year. 25 computer technician 2, 24-25 school year. 26 district network technician, 24-25 school year. 27 registered nurse, 24-25 school year. 28 permanent floater school nurse, 24-25 school year. 29 unpaid leave of absence. I so move.
Second. Ashley? Discussion? Roll call.
Dr. Miskowitz? Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. Palomo?
Abstain from 2, yes to everything else.
Thank you. Mr. Hyatt?
Yes.
Mr. Alonsky?
Yes.
Mrs. McCormack?
Yes.
Mrs. Gandhi?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mendez?
Yes. Retirement comments, I think you had?
I do. If you recall at the last meeting, we did not have retirement comments at the time for Mrs. Nancy Ulsh, so I'll read them first. Nancy Ulsh has been an instructional aide in the Marlboro Township Public Schools for the past 16 years. During her time in the district, she spent most of her years at Robertsville. When asked what she would miss the most after retiring, she responded her colleagues. Throughout her tenure in the district, Nancy has worked with a diverse student population across all grade levels. Her calm demeanor and dedication to her students have been admired by both staff and families. She has touched countless lives over the past 16 years, and we are grateful for having had the privilege of working with her. In retirement, she plans to spend time traveling abroad and working in her garden. Congratulations, Nancy. And now retirement comments for Maureen O'Connell. Maureen O'Connell began her career in Marlboro Township Schools as a substitute teacher in 2000. Shortly after that, she became an instructional assistant at the Early Learning Center before moving on to Asher Holmes and then to Marlboro Elementary School. In July of 2009, she became the principal secretary at Marlboro Memorial Middle School. During the interview process, it was evident that Maureen was just the person to step into that role. With her kind and gentle approach, along with the knowledge Maureen gained over the years, she served as a resource for the staff regarding a wide range of issues. She was also instrumental in creating and implementing the building budget each year. From gathering quotes to monitoring account balances and ordering supplies, Maureen's meticulous nature ensured that these tasks were accomplished precisely. Her bright smile greeted us every morning. Whether it was a good or bad day, her calm demeanor was reassuring to all. She had a way of making everyone feel welcome and comfortable. She was always there to ask after your family or pet. There was no question or task too big or too small. She was willing to help in whatever way she could and do so with a positive attitude and outlook. It is hard to put into words all that Maureen means to the staff at Memorial. She is sunshine personified. We will all miss her guidance and warm heart. We wish Maureen all the best in a retirement filled with health, happiness, long walks, bike rides, and quality time with her family, especially her grandchildren. Good luck, Maureen. You will be sorely missed, and Memorial will never be the same without you.
Thank you, and thank you to the staff. Okay, old business? Scary.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
yes, I'm not sure if this should be like with old business or new business. I had the motion that was put out at the last meeting regarding the malpractice, and after doing some more research and getting further input, I have a revised motion that I'd like to put forward for it. So should I do it with old business, or do you want me to wait for new? All right, so I'd like to motion for our board to file a grievance against Mr. Mark Zittimer and Shank Price with the Office of Attorney Ethics to review a potential violation of the rules of professional conduct and start a thorough and effective investigation by the District Ethics Committee and the Office of Attorney Ethics. Filing this grievance is not a civil lawsuit or a criminal complaint, and it is not filed with an intent to recuperate damages, but instead to recognize, address, and record a potential ethics violation via a thorough and detailed investigation by the two entities I previously mentioned into the unauthorized actions taken by Mr. Zittimer and the firm on behalf of the Marlboro Township Board of Ed without his consent or approval. So move.
Second? Danielle? Discussion?
I'd like to, can we discuss that, Mr. Gross, in executive, because this is a legal matter? We can vote on it here. Yeah, no, after we come back out. Of course. Yeah.
Depending on what questions you're gonna, if you're gonna have questions or comments that have any kind of legal implications, then certainly we shouldn't be discussing them in public session. But if you just want to vote on the motion, you certainly can, or if you want to move to table the motion until we have answers to your questions with regard to that things, any items that might need to be discussed in exec, which may have some legal implications.
You had a question too?
No, same. I just have additional questions, but yeah.
So, yeah, I'd like to table it so we can talk to executive session and come back out and do what we have to do.
So if there's a motion to table, then we need a second on the motion to table.
Second.
And then we would have all those in favor of tabling until we return from executive session. Raise your hands. I'm sorry. Okay, motion passes. So we're tabling the motion until after our executive session discussion. We will return from executive session.
And we can come back out and vote, right?
Exactly.
'Cause-
When we do the executive session motion, we'll say that action may be taken upon our return, and that would be one of those items.
Okay. Okay. Any other old business?
Yeah, I just wanted to give the board an update. It was asked at the previous meeting to find out about summer camp. So we were in the talks with the YMCA, and they are able to provide a summer camp for 2024. We're still working out the specifics, but they are able to provide it. So we're just going to basically work with them regarding the specifics, and then they'll be moving forward with, sending out a flyer and registration forms and getting everything in order. But it probably will just be at Robertsville as it has been in the past. So that's good news.
That's great.
Did we ever find out how many families actually use that?
Yeah, so the summer camp, I believe last year was 60 registrants. 60 students utilized it. Not as many as in the school year, but still enough to provide a program.
Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you for that. Any other old business? Any new business?
Yeah, I had emailed this to everyone 3 weeks ago around the policy sort of making. So I know we can't vote on it today, and that's cool, but I do just want to read it just to get it out there. We can either discuss it now, or you can take some time to absorb it. We have plenty of time to get feedback before we discuss this further at, May 27th meeting?
May 21st.
Sorry, May 21st meeting. So we have time, but I just want to get this out there right now. So I'm just going to read it. We can table a discussion on it, or we can have a discussion on it now. It's up to you guys. So motion to revise board policy. So this motion is put forth with the goal of fostering constructive and collaborative environment within the board, bridging gaps among different viewpoints, increasing public transparency, and enhancing our collective ability to serve the best interests of Marlboro Township Public Schools. It is with the understanding that the Board of Education recognizes the importance of continuous improvements and innovation in our policymaking process to better serve the educational goals of Marlboro Township Public Schools. We acknowledge the diversity of opinions and expertise among all of our board members that can be leveraged in making informed and balanced decisions. So let it be resolved that the Marlboro Public Schools Board of Education, again, we're not going to vote on this, but I'm just reading it as a motion, adopts the following procedure to enhance our policy development, revision, and approval process. And before I get into the details, let me just categorize this. I think it's, one, how we function, or how the committee is made up, how we communicate decisions by that committee to other board members, and then finally sort of the service providers we use. So those are the three broad buckets, but I'll read them kind of as I sketch them out. One, reorganization of the policy committee. The Board of Education will select members of the policy committee that will capitalize on their expertise and the value those skills bring to our policy committee. This includes prioritizing members with qualifications in the following areas wherever possible, which I think we do to some extent: human resource law, education, counseling, and/or parents or guardians. Policy cap revision. To ensure thorough review of considerations of each policy proposal, no more than 5 policies per month shall be on the agenda for either first or second reading, so that would be a total of 10. Meeting minutes procedure. The policy committee will take meeting minutes during each meeting. Minutes will be shared with all board members within 7 days of each committee meeting. At the next scheduled policy meeting, the minutes will be approved and made part of the public record. Board discussions. Before I read this, I'm not suggesting a board as a whole, but where a policy meets one or more of the following criteria, the policy should be added to the Board of Education meeting agenda for public discussion before scheduled for a first reading. Number 1, the policy includes substantive changes affecting Marlboro Township Public Schools, educational goals or services. Any policy that a majority of the policy committee determines to be a significant public interest. And 3, and finally, any policy being proposed or updated that were not approved by the majority of the policy committee prior to first reading. And then the final one is exploring the service providers. The Board of Education will explore transitioning from Strauss-Esme to a potential other service provider for reading policy alerts and assistance, policy drafting, acknowledging general dissatisfaction with their current service, as we've discussed in public meetings. Be it resolved. So that's it. It's in your inbox. We can discuss it now. We can take some time to absorb it. I know it's getting late. We've got a lot to talk about in executive, and we can have that discussion in the next meeting. So
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that back up, and I appreciate you sending it. I won't be able to attend the next meeting.
Oh.
It's actually a work thing, but you don't need me here. You have other people, so that's okay. I have a work obligation that I tried to get out of, but I can't. So a couple of things that I just want to bring up. I think I mentioned limiting it to 5 is we just have to have a caveat, right, of a number. And I don't know if it's 5. Definitely there's a number that's way too many, but there are times when they roll out together, have to roll out together, or should roll out together, right? We had that happen too. And so I think we just have to look at the number, right? And maybe there's just a cap, and maybe it's not 5, but I just want to put that out there.
yeah, and I'm okay with that because
Yeah.
a lot of those policies that push through that are several, some of the changes are minor, so we can figure out how we.
Right, exactly. Sometimes it's like one word, and sometimes it's an alert, and we can't control, and it's by, some sort. But anyway, that's my one thing.
And I think, if we all agree or we revise this to a point where we can agree on it, this will become a policy, or a policy will get updated to
Yeah.
include that in it. So we have time to figure out.
That's fine. And I know we're not voting on anything now, but because I won't be here at the next meeting, I just want to say 2 other
Yeah, yeah.
things.
Go ahead.
The caveat of when they should come to the committee of a whole is a little too broad. And I think we need to kind of look at that. You said substantial changes. What would that really mean, right? Because sometimes you're changing a lot of the wording in there. And do you care if we change the word from the to a? I'm just giving an example, right? Public interest, I could say everything could be a public interest, right? So I was trying to write down quickly, Chad, and remember, I think you said something about public interest.
Sure.
I would take a look at when it should come to a committee of a whole, if that's the route everybody's going to go, and what criteria, and make it a little more prescriptive so that it's not everything and it's open to interpretation. That's what I would say. And then you said something about majority vote on it, but I would look at that too. I just didn't quite understand that one. So just at a high level, those were just some of the things I would take a look at for me, but everybody else could do what they want. But I think you were going to say something too.
That's
Yeah,
good
I did
feedback.
have a question. Is this, is this change proposed for an immediate reorganization? Or is this, how exactly are you?
Or
are
come
you-
January.
Yeah, are you proposing to restructure the makeup of the policy committee now, mid-year? Or is that for the
Oh, yeah,
reorg meeting in January?
I think moving forward.
Oh, so you're saying
prioritize
like
the
after it
position.
was voted in, if it were to be voted in, you're saying
Yeah.
by that next point, we should have made the change to the committee?
we
I'm
just
just
look at
asking, that's a question.
Yeah, we just look at it, and
Okay.
if we agree that we need to add somebody in addition to the people, then we do it. Or we could all sit back and agree that the policy committee is structured as it should be.
There's 4
I don't think
people
you can make it
currently
more.
on it, yeah.
Yeah.
In order to add a person,
Becomes a
you would
quorum.
need to.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
4
right,
already
yeah.
on there.
Disregard that.
The same thing, Craig, I love, Chad, I love the overarching message, but again, if you read like a Robert's rules, the example I give you is I motion to have a coffee break in this meeting. There's a lot of verbiage in these motions, and again, no one's going to agree to everybody's personal point of view on the narrative surrounding it, which is all really great narrative, but in the motion, when you broke it down here, it's way, I would have a lot easier of a time telling you what I agree to and what I don't agree to, with just, you know, a numbered motion of I move to do A, B, C, and D, and then like what we do under those motions, once those motions pass or don't, we can, like, you know, hash out the details. But the lengthy paragraphs and hanging on all the verbiage in every word is where I'm getting caught up, because sometimes there's verbiage in there that I'm like, I can't agree with this, but the overarching plan of what you're laying out sounds great. So when you're asking myself to vote on a motion, you're asking me to agree to everything you've put in there, which I can't do, but the principle of your motion is very substantial and forward-thinking. So that is where I'm coming up short on these motions, is that they're so robust that it's hard to get on board with every word in the motion, and essentially that's what you're asking me to do, because it's a call to take action, and I can't take all the action.
Don't feel like I'm trying to shove all this through. We could easily break this up, so that's good
Yeah,
feedback.
thank you.
Yeah, I hear you.
Absolutely, I'm with you.
I don't disagree.
Michael?
So, quick overview, look at it, Chad. I think the 7 days takes care of a lot of issues we've been having, giving board members 7 days to look at the policies. I'm all on board with that, these 7 days. That means we don't do them as fast because the committee can only meet when it can meet. So be it. I'm okay with that. The 5 policies, except when, to Daniel's point before, some policies interact with other policies, so some may come down, might be 6 or 7, because this one interacts with that one, and they both should be on the same docket. So, you know, 5 is a give and take, depending on those reasons, for me. And the other point I would be okay on is bring it to the full board when there's not a majority. The other reasons, no, but when there's not a majority in the policy committee and it's at a standstill, then you can bring it to the full board before a first read. Because really, when you had 7 days to look at it, it's only a first read. It's still a full board discussion, and you had 7 days to digest it before it got to you. So I think we still have the same robust conversation. If it's stale in policy committee, then it should come here before it gets to the first reads. I agree to those 3 items.
Okay.
Off the top right now.
I
Great,
just
thank
have
you.
a question. I don't know if it's better suited for Mrs. Mendez or Mr. Gross. In our bylaws, it does state that we can have discussion for exploratory reasons, and some of these policies as a group without a public meeting. How is that upheld? That is in the bylaws that are listed. Exploratory conversation.
No, that part I got. You said you approve things without a public?
No, not
Oh,
approve. Exploratory conversation.
Right, okay.
As a group, as a whole.
You mean in executive or in public?
It's not, it just.
Oh, just as a group.
Well, that's basically similar to a committee structure, people without, less than 5 board members having an exploratory conversation about anything is.
It may be something worth pulling up in
Same
executive because it's written differently in our bylaws, and that would definitely be something that I would be interested in knowing more about. And then to Mrs. Gandhi's motion, I think that it's a perfect example. If we're going to look at policies regarding our communications protocol and policies, there's way more than 5. So I think there has to be a caveat, because what I wouldn't want to see happen as a policy-making board is we change 4 of them, we get them golden, where we're all comfortable and we're progressing, and then there's like 3 more that are kind of trailing behind from 2013 that haven't been touched, and there's confusion as to, well, are we going with policies, X, Y, and Z, or are we going to go with the 5 we just revised? So I'm okay with limitations, but I think that when we revisit the motion, a caveat, especially with things like communications and protocol, it would be most beneficial to us and board members after us if we kind of revise them all as a whole.
Yeah, and Chad, to that point, maybe just for me, just shorten it to a couple of categories, right? If there's a cap to that point, I think I'd mentioned there are some that come up with statutes, and so X number, except with the exception of, and then sometimes there can be an exception and a rule to that, because there are sometimes, to your point, 7 policies that tie to HIB, hypothetically. It could be code of conduct, it could be HIB, it could be substance abuse, right? And so there are some that roll together that we just have to think about. The other thing, to your point, Mr. Lansky, we have to look at the 7 days in advance, and I just want to understand the nuances of the 7 days, right? And because some of it is tied to when the committee can meet based on schedules, right? And availability of all of us plus administration. And so I have no problem with a time limit. If you want to review in advance, I'm there, that's fine. I just want to say, what if it's 8? What if it's 5, right?
And does it get pushed to the next meeting?
Right, does it get pushed to the next meeting? That's all I'm saying, like, it gets pushed or whatever happens was my other concern.
Well,
I have a
that's
question.
kind of what I said, so be it. If we can't meet within 7 days of,
Oh, then it gets pushed.
then
I
it gets
didn't hear
pushed,
that part. Okay,
because it's important
gotcha.
that the board members have 7 days to digest it. I think that's important.
Yeah, I didn't hear that part, thank you.
And those should be accompanied with like the meeting minutes. I think that's important, that's critical,
Yes.
because understanding why the changes happened and why are we making those changes, because otherwise we're just reading something. So
Correct.
we need to understand like what went behind those changes.
I have a question regarding, Chad, you might want to like look into it, or maybe I can look into it before you motion. The policy writers, I'm only familiar with Strauss Esme and NJSBA. I don't know if there are any others besides those 2 that are offered. I don't know if anybody else knows. They're not, just those 2. And is there a cost behind changing
Yes,
providers?
and I'm sorry, I was going to say that.
Okay.
A while back, I had reached, I think I mentioned that to you, to NJSBA.
Yeah.
Then we had some other things occur, but NJSBA will come out and give a presentation in public, in a public meeting, obviously, about the services that they provide, the cost if you want to transition to them. I never met with them. It was just to say, do you offer this service? And they said, yes. Other than that, obviously, I think I mentioned it to all of you and wherever. But I just wanted to know if that's
That's why I said explore, because I think that's probably the next step.
Yeah.
and I know there's a question. Go ahead, Aldo.
Sorry. Yeah, it was actually something that we had discussed in a prior meeting, because, the same exact conversation came up regarding policy notifications that we're receiving from Strauss Esme versus, what would be coming from NJSBA. And I don't know the exact figures, but if I remember, NJSBA was like, I want to say substantially cheaper, but regardless, it wasn't like an exorbitant amount of money. And what I was trying to recommend at the time was, it may be worth, if we're going to be doing policy revisions, why just look at, we have Strauss Esme already. Why not have NJSBA too? Because I want to say it was less than $1,000 a year to add the service. Like, for that amount of money, why wouldn't we just have both and compare the two and see, who's making what changes, why, who didn't send an alert for one policy whereas the other one did.
What was actually mandated and what wasn't?
Right, like what's mandated, what's not, because that was another,
That's the whole premise of that.
Right, that was the
I
whole
completely
thing.
agree. I mean,
Yeah.
I would go even further
That
than
can't
just
happen
parting
again.
ways with Strauss Esme if it was up to me, but yeah.
Yeah, but that can't happen again. That's kind of why.
Yeah. No, and thank you, Chad, for bringing that up, and I think good discussion. So if you're going to do whatever in the next meeting, I gave you some of my thoughts, but you all vote how you're going to vote, and then
Look,
I'll watch and see the outcome of that.
I'll just say this is helpful. I've come into this board, I've never been on a school board before, so this policy-making part to me was both mysterious and I've learned a lot, right, in the last couple months. So these are, I think, things to try to improve that from my perspective coming into this fresh. But I also need to collaborate based on your experience. Some of you have been on this board for 2.5 years, so it's good. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chad. Any other new business? Okay, we're going to open to public comments. Anybody on the list? Does anybody want to speak? Mrs. Bono.
Hi, good evening, Ms. Mendez, members of the Board of Education, my fellow community members. When I spoke earlier about the cost, I didn't realize the impact it would have. I want to thank you all for volunteering your time as a Board of Ed member. We know it is a volunteer position and you spend hours upon hours here. And from my understanding as a community member, it is the direct responsibility of board members to make policies, develop plans, evaluate outcomes, not manage the day-to-day operations. And you have a very special role as the liaison, right, between the community members' concerns, the taxpayers, communicating with the superintendent. But it is the Board of Ed's responsibility to uphold, right, and enforce these policies. When I mentioned earlier about the cost, and Mr. Hyatt, I thank you for acknowledging I wasn't talking about no external or cost. I was talking about, you know, not to be punny, but to go pro bono, right, for the public good, services rendered at a lower cost. And now I'm hearing that that motion was, I don't even know if it was a motion, item number 14 was voted down, and now we have a new motion to file a grievance. So I guess my question is, we know the Board of Ed has adopted and amended a prior policy that has created a cost because the district is being sued by the Attorney General and we are in litigation for that. What is the cost at now filing a grievance? Because I do believe that our funds need to be directed towards the day-to-day operations of the district, servicing the students of Marlboro. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Motion to close public comments. Second, Annette. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay. Public comments is closed. Executive session resolution. Be it resolved in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, the Marlboro Township Board of Education shall conduct a closed executive session pursuant to the personnel and legal exceptions prescribed by NJSA 10-4-12 for the purpose of discussing matter of attorney-client privilege. It is anticipated the length of time of this executive session will be 60 minutes and that action may be taken in public after the executive session. Be it further resolved, the minutes of the executive session will be released when the need for confidentiality in accordance with NJSA 10-4-12 no longer applies. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Discussion? Okay, thank you.
Been drinking so much water all day.